Her daughter-in-law said, "She doesn't belong in our family photo," smiling for the camera. Marion Foster, widow and mother-in-law for 30 years, didn't step aside. Lydia, the woman she'd welcomed into the family, thought the slight would be forgotten. By morning, the deed to the house and every key would be back in Marion's possession. She'd been their host and their matriarch. Now, she was the guardian of her own home. And when they came to hang that photo, they'd find the walls and the house gone from their reach. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. I froze when I overheard her say, "She doesn't belong in our family photo." I froze halfway up the staircase, my hand still resting on the rail. From the living room below came Clara's voice, low but unmistakable. "She doesn't belong in our family photo." The words slid under my skin like ice water. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. But then Liam murmured something I couldn't catch, and Clara replied with a little laugh. Light, casual, the kind people use when they want to pretend cruelty is just a joke. I stood there, invisible in my own son's house, staring at the framed pictures along the stairwell, Liam's wedding, their trips to the coast, birthdays, holidays. In most of them, I was there on the edge of the frame, a polite smile fixed in place, like someone who'd wandered into the wrong party but was too embarrassed to leave. I forced myself to keep walking, smoothing my face into something neutral. The smell of rosemary and roasted chicken filled the kitchen, and I pasted on the smile I'd been perfecting for years. "Mom, you made it," Liam said when he finally looked up. He kissed my cheek, already glancing over my shoulder for someone else. Clara emerged from the dining room, perfectly put together as always, a glass of white wine in her manicured hand. "Annette," she said, giving me the kind of smile you give to a neighbor you barely know. "Coat in the hall closet, please. We're just about ready for pictures." I nodded, setting my purse on the bench by the door. My heart was thudding hard enough to make me lightheaded, but I kept my voice even. "Smells wonderful in here." The rest of the family trickled in. Liam's 2 kids tearing through the hallway, Clara's parents chatting loudly in the living room, a few neighbors who seemed to have become regular fixtures at these gatherings. I stood near the window, watching the yard fade into the dim November light. The leaves were nearly gone, branches stripped bare. When it was time for the photo, everyone shuffled into the living room. Clara took charge immediately, directing people where to stand, fixing collars, smoothing skirts. Her voice was brisk, efficient, as if she were arranging a business meeting instead of a family moment. "Annette, maybe you could stand." She paused, her eyes scanning the group. "On the far end, by the lamp. That way everyone fits." I stepped into place. From where I stood, the glare from the lamp hit my cheek, washing me out. It didn't matter. I smiled when the camera clicked, because that's what you do. You smile, even when you feel yourself disappearing. I noticed the subtle glances, Clara's quick check to see if I was in frame, Liam's distracted gaze, the polite nods from Clara's parents as though acknowledging a distant relative. The kids squirmed, already looking bored. When the last picture was taken, conversation burst back into the room. People moved toward the dining table, plates clinking, wine pouring. I murmured something about needing fresh air and slipped toward the door. Outside, the cold hit me like a wall, the kind that makes your water instantly. I stood on the porch, hands in my coat pockets, watching the bare branches sway against the gray sky. My breath clouded in front of me, the only thing in the world that seemed so... I thought about all the times I told myself to let things slide, to be gracious, to be the bigger person. How many little cuts had I ignored, pretending they didn't sting? Through the window, I could see the family gathering around the table. Laughter floated through the glass, muffled and distant. They looked like a picture-perfect family, and maybe to them, they were. But I wasn't part of that picture. Not really. Annette walks away from the gathering, determined to make a change, but unsure how to begin. The family photo wasn't just a photo. It was the final straw in a long line of disrespect. The heater in my car rattled weakly, blowing lukewarm air as I drove home in the dark. The road was slick with a thin sheen of frost, headlights from oncoming cars slicing through the cold night. Clara's words played on a loop in my head, sharp and deliberate now, no longer muffled by walls or distance. I tried to push them aside, but they clung to me like burrs. At home, I set my purse on the kitchen counter and stood in the stillness. The clock above the stove ticked softly. No laughter here, no clinking of glasses, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint groan of the house settling. I poured myself a cup of tea, letting the steam curl against my face. My hands curled tighter around the mug as memory after memory pushed forward. The time Clara corrected the way I folded towels, right in front of Liam. The Christmas she forgot to tell me about the matching sweaters, so I was the only one in plain red. The birthday dinner where she'd ordered me a salad instead of asking what I wanted. Because, as she'd said with a tight smile, "It's lighter and you'll feel better." I'd laughed those moments off, told myself she meant well, told myself not to make trouble for Liam, but there's a line you cross without knowing it, where patience stops being grace and starts being surrender. I'd been surrendering for years. I moved into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. My eyes drifted to the framed photograph on the mantel. Thomas and I, standing in front of the house we'd built from the ground up. His arms slung around me, both of us sunburned and sweaty from planting the maple trees out front. That house had been our sanctuary, the proof of everything we'd worked for. I remembered the day Liam asked if he and Clara could move in for a while. Thomas was already gone by then, and the house felt too big for me alone. I'd said yes without hesitation, happy to have my son under my roof again. Over time, the lines blurred, whose house it was, whose rules mattered. Somehow, my home had turned into theirs, and I'd learned to tread lightly in my own kitchen, in my own living room. Tonight, though, that picture, Clara deciding who belonged and who didn't, had snapped something inside me. I set my tea down and went to the small desk in the corner. The bottom drawer stuck a little, as it always had, before sliding open with a groan. Inside, beneath a stack of utility bills and old letters, was a plain manila envelope. I slid it out carefully and set it on the desk. The paper inside was crisp, the black ink still bold. The deed to the house. My name, no one else's. I traced my fingers over the embossed seal, feeling the texture press into my skin. In all these years of giving in, of swallowing my pride for the sake of keeping the peace, I'd forgotten this. Forgotten that I still held the one thing Clara couldn't control. My home. My choice. The thought scared me, but it also lit something deep in my chest. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for them to change, to stop hoping that respect would just appear if I smiled enough, stayed quiet enough. The air in the room seemed sharper now, charged with possibility. For the first time, in years, I didn't feel like the one on the edge of the frame. I felt centered, present. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of the decision forming in my mind. Annette pulls out the deed to the house, deciding it's time to make a bold move. I couldn't let Clara get away with this anymore. My plan had to be more than just words. By morning, the quiet determination that had kept me awake all night hardened into something sharper. My coffee went cold on the kitchen table as I sat there, staring at the manila envelope, its edges curled slightly with age. I had spent years telling myself the house was just walls and a roof, but now it felt like the last piece of myself I hadn't given away. The phone book in the drawer was dusty, the pages curling, but I found the number I needed, an old colleague of Thomas's, now one of the most respected real estate attorneys in town. When the receptionist told me he could see me that afternoon, I felt an odd mix of relief and dread. The office was downtown, in one of those brick buildings with polished wood floors and the faint smell of lemon oil. The receptionist's heels clicked as she led me to a corner office lined with law books and framed photographs. "Annette," Michael said warmly, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, his eyes curious. "It's been a long time." I settled into the leather chair across from his desk, the sound of it creaking under my weight. For a moment, I wasn't sure where to begin. Then it all came out, how Liam and Clara had moved in, how the house had slowly stopped feeling like mine, how Clara's latest slight had been the breaking point. Michael listened without interrupting, his hands folded on the desk. When I finished, he leaned back, studying me. The good news is, Annette, the property is still yours. Legally, you have every right to decide who lives there, or if it's sold. The word sold landed like a stone in my stomach. I don't want to sell, I said quickly. Thomas and I built that place with our own hands. Selling would feel like erasing us. He nodded. Then don't, but leverage it. If they want to stay, they need to agree to your terms. You can make it formal. Written conditions for tenancy, even a timeline. If they won't agree, you can evict them. It's your call. I stared at the polished wood of his desk, my reflection faint in the surface. The idea of eviction felt brutal, but the alternative was worse. Another year, another decade of being invisible in my own home. Michael slid a blank legal pad toward me. Write down what you want. Exactly what you want. We'll draft it into something that gets their attention. My pen hovered for a moment before moving. Respect. Clear boundaries. No more decisions made without me. My hand shook, but the more I wrote, the steadier it became. When we were done, Michael said, I'll prepare the letter, but Annette, once this goes out, there's no going back. Are you ready for that? I thought about Thomas, about how fiercely he had protected the life we built. He wouldn't have let anyone, least of all someone married into the family, decide whether I belonged. The memory steadied me. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Driving home, the late afternoon sun slanted low across the windshield, turning the frost on the fields to glitter. For the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own life instead of sitting in the passenger seat. That night, I sat at the same kitchen table where Thomas and I had once argued over paint colors and laughed about the crooked fence posts he swore were artistic. I opened my laptop and read the letter Michael had sent over for approval. It was brief, almost cold in its formality, but that was the point. No emotion for Clara to twist, no openings for Liam to negotiate away. Just the facts. The house was mine, and it was no longer available to them under the current arrangement. My finger hovered over the mouse, the send button glow, being at the bottom of the screen. I could almost hear Thomas's voice, steady, certain, telling me to do what needed to be done. With a deep breath, I clicked. Annette sends a letter to Liam and Clara informing them that the house is no longer available to them. I handed them the letter and felt the weight of years of resentment settle into my bones. The late afternoon light spilled across the living room rug as I waited, the envelope balanced on my lap. My palms were damp despite the cool air drifting in from the half-open window. Outside, the maple leaves rattled against each other in the wind, restless, like me. The sound of tires on gravel announced their arrival. A moment later, the front door opened and Liam stepped in, his jacket half unzipped. Clara followed, her heels sharp against the hardwood. Neither of them smiled. "We got your email," Liam said, his voice tight. "What is this about?" I rose slowly, meeting his gaze before extending the envelope. "This is the formal letter. I wanted to give you a copy in person." Clara took it before he could, sliding a manicured nail under the seal. Her eyes skimmed the page and her lips curved, not in surprise, but something closer to amusement. "So you're reclaiming the house," she said, her tone almost conversational. "Just like that." I kept my voice steady. "It's my home. I've been more than generous letting you both stay here, but that generosity has been taken for granted." Liam frowned. "Mom, if this is about the other night, it's about every night," I cut in, my hands tightening at my sides. "About years of being dismissed, sidelined, made to feel like I don't belong in the very place your father and I built. I won't be treated as an outsider in my own home." Clara's gaze flicked up from the letter, cool and appraising. "This sounds like punishment, Annette. Vindictive. Honestly, a little bitter." Her words slid toward me like knives, but I refused to flinch. "No, It's boundaries. Something I should have set a long time ago. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the mantel. Liam shifted his weight, glancing between us. "Mom," he began, softer now, "this is serious. Where are we supposed to go? What happens to the kids?" "I'm not throwing you out tonight," I said, "but things will change. If you want to stay, it will be under terms that respect me as part of this family. No more decisions without me. No more making me invisible." Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, though her posture remained relaxed. "And if we don't agree to your terms?" I held her gaze. "Then you'll need to find somewhere else to live." Clara leaned back against the arm of the couch, folding her arms. "Or," she said lightly, "you can back down, because if you don't, you'll never see us again. Liam, the kids, we're done. No visits, no holidays, nothing." The air seemed to press in around me, the weight of her words heavier than I expected. My breath caught, but I forced my voice to remain calm. "If you think that threat will scare me into silence, you don't know me as well as you think." Liam's brow furrowed. "Clara!" "No, Liam," she said, her tone sharp now. "Your mother has made her choice." I looked at him then, at the boy I'd raised into a man who now stood between his wife and his mother, torn and uncertain. "I haven't made a choice, Liam," I said quietly. "I've made a stand. There's a difference." He swallowed hard, glancing at the letter still in Clara's hand. This isn't something we can just walk back from." "Exactly," Clara murmured, almost to herself. I stepped forward, taking the letter from her fingers. "I know what I'm risking, but I'd rather risk everything than keep living like a guest in my own life." Clara's smile returned, small, almost pitying. "Then here's my ultimatum, Annette. Back down, or you lose Liam forever." Clara's words hung in the air like smoke as Liam stood, frozen between us, waiting to see which one of us would move first. Liam's silence was louder than any argument. He wasn't speaking to me, and neither was Clara. The first day without a word from Liam felt like a pause, a breath held in the middle of an argument. By the third day, it was something else entirely. A heavy, deliberate quiet that followed me from room to room. I saw them in passing. Clara's car gone most mornings, Liam's truck in the driveway when I came home from errands. We moved like shadows in the same space, never crossing paths for more than a moment. If I passed Liam in the hall, he'd glance down at his phone or pretend to adjust his watch. Clara didn't bother pretending. She'd just look through me, like I was a smudge on a window she had no intention of cleaning. Once I left a plate of cookies on the kitchen counter, an olive branch disguised in sugar. The next morning, the plate was gone, cookies untouched. The house felt colder without the usual background noise, the murmur of the television, Liam's deep laugh, even Clara's constant suggestions about how I should be doing things. Now there was just the ticking of the mantel clock and the creak of the floorboards when I moved. I thought about knocking on Liam's door, telling him we needed to talk, but every time I pictured it, I saw the look on his face the day I handed him that letter, confusion edged with betrayal, and I couldn't bring myself to break first. The silence became a test I hadn't agreed to take, and I refused to fail it. Instead, I started filling the quiet with my own life. I dusted off the sewing machine Thomas had given me for our 10th anniversary, the one I hadn't touched in years. I mended a stack of clothes I'd been meaning to fix, then started piecing together a quilt from old fabric scraps. The hum of the needle became its own kind of comfort. I took long walks through the neighborhood, nodding to the same dog walkers and joggers I'd seen for years but never spoken to. Some stopped to chat, asking how I'd been. I gave them the polite version of the truth. "Oh, just keeping busy." But something in my voice must have carried more, because they lingered a little longer, offering warmth in the form of shared stories and neighborly gossip. When I stopped by the church one Saturday to drop off canned goods for the food drive, Mrs. Henderson caught my hand. "We've missed you at the quilting circle," she said. "You should come back. It's not the same without you." I promised I would, and for once I meant it. Evenings were the hardest. I'd sit at the kitchen table with a book, the lamp casting a small pool of light while the rest of the house sat in shadow. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard would creak, and I'd hear the faint murmur of voices, Liam and Clara talking behind their closed door,